Hello everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Jackie Boyle, I'm a gynaecologist at Monash Health and the head of the Health Service and Equity Unit at Eastern Health Clinical School. I'd like to start the meeting today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands from where we are all meeting and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. For me, that's the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, but obviously there are many different areas where everyone's joining today. And I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people online today. It's with huge excitement that I am facilitating this launch today. It's been auspiced under the National Health and Medical Research Council, Centre of Research Excellence, Women's Health and Reproductive Life. And I have worked with the powerhouse behind this, Dr. Kate Johnson-Atta, on other Health Talk resources, along with Professor Renata Kakanovich. And the rich lived experiences that these resources bring is really fabulous. Our aim was to create a resource that is useful to all women and gender diverse people, whether they are partnered or unpartnered from many backgrounds as they negotiate infertility and fertility treatment. And we've been supported in this endeavour by a wonderful reference group. So things today we'll be having Anna MacLeod will launch this resource. We'll hear from various speakers about the context and development of the resource and the lived experience from two of our consumers. So I would just like to introduce Anna MacLeod. So Anna, you have all the bios on the Zoom invite, so I'll just do a very brief one for everyone. Anna is the CEO of the Victorian Assisted Reproductive Treatment Authority. She is a lawyer, mediator and registered nurse and has been a member of the reference group for the Health Talk resource and an investigator on CRE-WHiRL. Over to you, Anna.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much. What a great privilege to officially launch this magnificent digital resource. Part of the Victorian Assisted Reproductive Treatment Authority's remit is to educate and provide information to all consumers about fertility and also infertility. And also VARTA is in partnership with a number of magnificent organisations, Healthy Male, Gene House for Women's Health, Global and Women's Health at Monash Uni and the Robertson Research Institute. And together we make up a partnership, Your Fertility. So the Your Fertility Coalition, again, so while VARTA predominantly looks at looking after Victorians, Your Fertility Coalition looks at obviously assisting all Australian people. And so we think this is a fabulous resource because people more and more want to hear from those with lived experience. So it is so generous of all 25 people, both women and gender diverse people, to share their stories. Some are so raw, beautiful, sad, and truthful and authentic. So we're so grateful. I would encourage all people who are going through either a fertility or an infertility journey, struggling with infertility or you know, seeking to get the best fertility outcome of their, you know, of their goal that they can, that they look at these wonderful, wonderful stories on this fabulous platform, Health Talk Australia. So I think that there are some wonderful people here to really talk to what's been launched. So I will now hand over, but I'm very honoured to be able to launch it. It is a great resource. We'll be promoting it through our website, through both the Your Fertility website and the VARTA website. We'll be spreading the news in our newsletters. We want everybody who is participating today to spread the news, to hear the stories, to listen to them, and we hope you take something away from them.
Thanks so much, Anna. Just a reminder to everyone, so I think that Amanda has put in the chat that she's live tweeting and some of the Twitter handles to use. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. It's a bit easier for us to monitor that. And I will now hand over to Professor Helena Teede. She's an endocrinologist and Director of Monash Centre for Health Research and Implementation at Monash University, and Executive Director of the Monash Partners Academic Health Sciences Centre. She's also the lead on the CRE-WHiRL that has been the umbrella project for this resource. Thanks, Helena.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And thanks, Anna, for that passionate launch. Fantastic. And just to reiterate, all the thanks to the amazing contributors and people who've worked on this project over time. So just very briefly, this project is auspiced under the National Health and Medical Research Council funded Centre for Research Excellence around women's health and reproductive life. This is a real privilege to have this sort of opportunity. So there are only 6 clinical conditions every year that are awarded a Centre of Excellence. It's highly competitive and it's around need. And this particular Centre for Research Excellence builds on one we had previously around polycystic ovary syndrome. This particular focus is on extending the work in polycystic ovary syndrome, which affects around 15% of women, infertility, which affects similar numbers, and also early menopause, which affects around 10 to 15% of women. The work that's involved in this health talk builds on previous health talk resources that we've developed across this team, and is going to be a really vital resource for all range of people who are affected by infertility and their partners and families. The body of work, the real purpose of the Centre for Research Excellence is to have impact for those affected by the conditions that we've outlined. And that has a range of different outputs, which are primarily driven by the people affected by those conditions. So, for example, across the spectrum of those conditions I've mentioned, we have a range of apps that currently reach out around the world. We have a range of question prompt lists, and we have these opportunities for Health Talk, which is really an experience resource, but there's a great deal of expertise and development and time and effort from everyone, including those involved in developing these resources. And it's part of a suite of basically having an impact to make sure that people are provided with evidence-based but people-focused experience and resources to help them improve their health outcomes. So this particular infertility resource fits in the context of our co-leadership of an international guideline in infertility that will actually address some of the gaps that are currently being identified, and that will be released reasonably soon. It also fits with a number of other additional resources that we will link with VARTA and others to help to promote and to improve the quality of life, experience and outcomes for those affected by infertility. I will end there because there's a great deal of great work to highlight today, but just to thank again everybody who's been involved. Back to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Helena. I'd now like to introduce Professor Beverley Vollenhoven. She's a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist. She is the CRE-WHiRL Chair of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Monash University and Director of Gynecology and Research at Monash Health. She's also a clinician at Monash IVF. Thank you, Beverley.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And I must say I'm very happy to be involved in the launch of Health Talk Australia's new online resource. It's actually very timely given the changes that are occurring in assisted reproductive technology, the regulatory bodies and the policy landscapes in part of Australia. This is particularly so for Victoria. So Victoria has historically been the national leader in ART policy and regulation, and I carry the CRE-WHiRL chair of the department, and CRE-WHiRL was the father of IVF. So in Victoria, we've recently updated the ART Act. This was updated in October last year, following a review by Michael Gorton in 2019. And then in 2020, there was an inquiry into ART practices in Victoria by the Health Complaints Commissioner. As you may also know, New South Wales last month announced its Affordable IVF Initiative. South Australia reviewed its ART laws in 2017, and Western Australia has begun drafting new legislation governing ART and surrogacy, really in response to a review led by Dr. Sonia Allen. So among the range of concerns underpinning these various reform initiatives, there are two that are particularly relevant to the resource that is being launched today. This is accurate consumer information about ART and inclusivity and anti-discrimination. As the Gorton Review notes, ART is a distinctive area of healthcare insofar as it's predominantly delivered by private services, with government playing a limited role in regulating the industry. We're hoping that in Victoria very soon, we will, however, have public IVF. One of the consequences of a largely privatised service system is a substantial out-of-pocket cost for patients, putting IVF out of reach for many Australians. On the Infertility and Experiences online resource, you will hear how participants navigated this aspect of their journey. Another key concern linked to self-regulation, and this is particularly an issue that I would like to see dealt with, if you like, for want of a better word, is the information provided to patients regarding treatment success and the use of add-on therapies that add substantial cost to an IVF cycle. Sometimes the add-ons can cost more than the IVF cycle itself, and none of these add-ons actually have proven benefits. Several recommendations in the Gorton Review and the at the HCC inquiry in Victoria specifically address the need for greater clarity of consumer information about infertility and ART. Now, our figures from each IVF centre are collected on a yearly basis, and we get a publication from a group called ANZARD, and that tells us what our chances of success, or what our patients' chances of success are with each group. However, this is really published for a technical audience, and therefore the recent development of consumer-focused independent websites such as Your IVF Success and Your Fertilities is very welcome, because it's written for patients or consumers, and this will make it a lot easier for them to see what their chances of success are. And here in Victoria, which has really, as I said, led the way, VARTA continues to play a public education role across a wide range of issues, including in relation to add-ons. So the resource we are launching today brings a focus on the lived experience of infertility and fertility treatment, grounded in rigorous qualitative research. It also responds to the Gorton Review's call for greater clarity in the provision of clinical information and social and emotional aspects of ART and infertility. So on the resource, you can find everything from patients or participants with recollections of when they first decided to want to have children, through how they balance fertility treatment with work, which is something that can be quite hard to do, and the navigation of relationships with partners, friends, and family, through to their experience of diagnosis and treatment, of pregnancy and birth, and for some, the difficult decision to stop IVF. This is indeed a valuable resource. A core focus of some of the current reforms, particularly again in the Victorian context, is to unwind some of the paternalistic and discriminatory attitudes baked into previous iterations of ART policy. It was not long that in Victoria, you actually had to be married to do IVF, and be in a heterosexual relationship. That was then broken down to you had to be in a de facto heterosexual relationship, and it's only recently that IVF has been accessible to a diverse group of people. Single parents and members of the LGBTIQIA+ community have in the past been excluded from accessing ART and continue to face higher hurdles in accessing Medicare rebates. Other forms of discrimination experienced by people from these groups seeking treatment includes clinic paperwork designed around heteronormative assumptions, prejudicial attitudes held by clinic or hospital staff, or simply not seeing themselves represented or included on the leaflet, poster, or online resource. High treatment fees, again, are a form of socioeconomic exclusion, blocking people on low incomes from accessing ART. Hopefully this will be resolved by the accessibility of public IVF. Clearly, many of these issues require legislative policy and practice responses. However, representation matters, and in this regard, the Health Talk online resource does an excellent job of capturing and representing the diversity of people experiencing infertility or ART and the relationships they live in, and uses language inclusive of gender diversity across the site. As a practicing fertility specialist, and I've been practicing since 1997 in Melbourne, I have a strong interest in supporting efforts to address the matters raised in the various ART reviews and reform initiatives around Australia. I highly commend this resource for the contribution it makes to improving communication around ART and for its intentionally inclusive approach. I hope and have no doubt it will enable women and gender diverse people from all backgrounds and walks of life to feel supported and less alone through accessing a wealth of personal stories and evidence-based clinical information. And I encourage you to spend some time having a good look around the resources I did a few days ago, and to share it with your colleagues, friends, and family members or patients. Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks so much, Beverley. It's really great to put it into that context of broader reform, legislative and policy reform. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So next up, I would like to introduce Dr. Kate Johnson-Atta. She's a visiting fellow at RMIT and Senior Policy and Advocacy Officer at Women's Health Victoria. She's co-director of Health Talk Australia, and as I said before, has really led the research and resource development for this project. Would not have happened without her. Thank you, Kate.
So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's here today and who's on the panel. I just want to spend a little bit of time introducing the online resource to you if you haven't had a chance to have a look. And also, if you have had a look, to just kind of give you a bit of a sense of why we did it and what is involved. So basically, as many of the people that we spoke to on our as part of the research told us, finding out that you can't easily get pregnant or being aware that it will be more complicated due to your sexuality, your gender, or because you're single is knowledge that can be very difficult to come to terms with. And then the notion of then having to surmount extra hurdles to become a parent is even more difficult. And interestingly, despite how common fertility treatment is these days, it and also the causes of infertility are actually not that widely understood by the general population. So we wanted to go out and gather the stories of people who'd been through these experiences so that they could be shared online with others embarking or already on their way on the same journey, to make that journey a little less overwhelming, a little less alien, and a little less isolating. We're also conscious that all kinds of people confront all kinds of fertility problems. So Australia is obviously an incredibly diverse society, and infertility and fertility treatment are very complex and rapidly evolving areas of health and medicine. So for this resource to be as useful to as wide a range of people and experiences as possible, we needed to try to reflect that, though within a sample of just 25 people, because this was qualitative research. So it wasn't an easy task. Nonetheless, we had a go. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides. I just wanted to show them so that you could get a sense of the people that we spoke to whose stories are on the resource. So this is their demographic diversity. And then in terms of their the reasons that they were having fertility problems, again, that's a very big long list of contributing factors and causes. And then the types of treatments that they experienced, ranging from, this is using VARTA's categorisation, ranging from simple techniques like ovulation induction through to full IVF and donor treatment. And we also spoke with one person who'd opted not to do any treatment at all and just to not have children at this point. So the resource itself has a very simple structure. It's basically sort of topped and tailed with a welcome and overview page and a further resources page. And in the middle is this very rich information, which is organised as a series of what we call talking points, which is a series of short multimedia films on different themed topics. and then people's profiles, which are edited narratives of each person who was interviewed for the resource. So these are just a few screenshots. That's the welcome and overview page, and you can see the menu on the left. So that's got a trailer video on the front for people to sort of see what the site is all about. The resources page, this is just the top. It's quite a, you can scroll all the way down and see those topics that are listed on the left there. So that's for people who want to go off and find out, more details. It's all been checked by our reference group, who were in an interdisciplinary group, including clinicians and lived experience people. And then these are the talking points. So they're organised into about 9 categories. And as you can see on that slide there, they sort of go from chronologically from first thinking about becoming a parent and trying to conceive through the kind of diagnosis, testing and treatment journey with a section on donor conception and surrogacy. And then people's reflections on their experiences with health practitioners and services, information and support, and for those who did conceive, what it was like becoming a parent, as well as experiences of miscarriage and not conceiving, relationships, work and finances, and then reflections and advice for others. So there's actually 40 films, so there's a huge amount of information on there if you'd like to have a look. So an example of one talking point is just shown here. So one thing that we did on this resource was we had little explainers at the top. So if you'd like to know, for example, more about donor conception, you can click on that box there. There's a summary of people's experiences, and then these short animated films, which are a mix of people who were video recorded and animations for those who weren't. Then the people's profiles, there's these 25 individual stories, so you can search for them by stage of treatment or by these little thumbnails that are shown where you get a little snapshot of each person's particular circumstances. And then the individual story has the person's sort of fertility experience and biographical details up the top, and then an edited short version of their story and links to other films that they're in. So that is really it. And then as I mentioned before, this is the research team here. So myself, Jackie, Renata Kakanovic, Susanna Ostojic, and Crosswalk Media, who helped with did the online resource production. And we also had this excellent reference group who assisted us throughout the entire process of producing the online resource and doing the research. So that's a really quick tour of the website, so I encourage you to have a look, and it was a great experience working on it. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Kate. It is a fabulous resource and there's lots to explore there. We have been so grateful for the time that all the participants have given us and their very generous sharing of their lived experience, and we are very fortunate to have 2 with us today. So thank you so much. We're going to start with Georgia. Georgia is an enrolled nurse working at a hospital. She was born in England and migrated to Australia 9 years ago. After meeting and marrying her husband, they decided they wanted to start a family, but found it difficult to conceive, despite being relatively young. When Georgia volunteered to be interviewed for Health Talk Australia, she was about to start ovulation induction. Eventually, she and her husband went on to IVF, which was successful, and Georgia is now in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And you can see more of her story online. Thank you so much, Georgia, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, my name's Georgia, and that was a really good introduction of what's happened to me and in the last few years. So our personal journey for me was definitely just an emotional one. Me and my husband got married in 2017, and I think along with probably everyone when they start trying to conceive and have no idea about reproductive issues or what might be happening, you just expect it to be easy and it's going to happen, and it's just, yeah, that we're not going to go through this emotional journey that we have. So for me, it comes from an emotional side rather than an analytical side of things. I was 23 when we got married and had never tracked a cycle or known how to even go about that right from the beginning. And it was about a year after we said, as soon as we get married, that's it, we're going to start trying, we're going to have children, and we'll be parents in 9 months' time. And it was going to be really easy. But that didn't happen. And about a year into it, it became very stressful on the both of us. And I think it's really important to highlight that this is, for a lot of people who are married or are in the same-sex partnership or whatever it might be, you go through it together. And that was a really important side for me to start with, was that we had to do this together, and that we were going to be strong through this, and nothing was going to break us or make us unhappy or whatever. But when you get really into it, and it becomes a very stressful and emotional ride, my husband found it very difficult with how does he support me in this journey, and how does he know when to jump on the bandwagon and maybe jump off with me. And that's a really hard balance to try and find. So jumping into us trying to conceive, we went to a fertility specialist and went through many tests, lots of blood tests, scans and all that sort of stuff. And they found that I had polycystic ovaries, not the syndrome, but just polycystic ovaries. And I was blown by that. I couldn't believe that something might be happening, and I had no idea. And it's quite alienating in your own body to get something like that. So she said, ovulation induction is going to be perfect for you guys. It's going to work. And, or they don't promise it's going to work, but it's perfect for you is what you get from that. So we went into that. We did 3 rounds of ovulation induction with no success. Then we went into IVF, where we had a cancelled cycle, which in itself is an emotional turmoil. Then we went to an IVM round, which I'd never heard about, didn't think that it was even a factor. And then we had, that was not successful. And then we had another IVF round, which was successful, and I'm really, really grateful for that. It's a really difficult cycle to go through. It's a difficult process, and not knowing what's going to happen when you get in there is really difficult, and trying to find a resource that can help you rather than be quite toxic to your own mindset is really, really difficult. So the study was offered to me through my fertility clinic, and coming from a medical background myself, I know how important research is and how it can really affect people and their lives. And this being such an emotional journey anyway, you try and find some solace in anything you can find, whether that's lived experiences, online researches, a Facebook page from America that I have no idea who people are, but I'm going to see if they can relate to me in any way. And that can get yourself into quite a toxic mind space and a toxic way of thinking. So to have something structured like this would have been so helpful for me. So I'm really, really grateful to be a part of it. So I knew that it was really important, and having the huge array of different stories and journeys in each way so somebody can connect to it can just be, it's so necessary, and it's so important. Infertility remains to be among the taboo subjects, which I just find mind-blowing, that people can think that they don't want to talk about it, and that's, for me, very sad. I've always been very open with my journey and found that to be really, really helpful. And you find so many people that are in the same boat, and you have no idea until you start talking about it. So I've been very open, and it's just incredible the amount of support that I've had from others when you start opening up about it. So going through IVF and the research that we're going through at the moment, it would have been helpful to know the terminology and what does ovulation induction mean and what does IVF actually mean for the actual person, rather than reading it from a small brochure. So yeah, I did a lot of searching highs and lows for different resources, and I'm just so glad that this one's coming out. I'm so grateful to be a part of the research project that's so close to home, and just knowing how important research is really good. I hope that being a part of it, I can help somebody in some way navigate through this really crazy journey that people can be on. And hopefully somebody connect with it, really. So yeah, that's from my side of things, really.
Thank you so much, Georgia.
No problem.
It can be a very alone time, and it's very, and you think that you're the only person. It can be, people say that they feel like they're the only person going through it. So that's why I think this is wonderful and very generous of you to share. I would now like to introduce another participant, Dr. Holly Swell. She's a queer solo parent by choice who conceived her 2 kids using IVF and a known donor. She is the founder and former coordinator of Rainbow Families Queensland, an organisation that supports, celebrates and advocates on behalf of LGBTQI+ parents across Queensland. Holly is passionate about the importance of using inclusive language surrounding pregnancy and birth in order to encompass trans and gender diverse birthing people's experiences. She was involved in the reference group responsible for helping to develop these much needed resources, and we are very grateful for your input, Holly. Thank you.
I'm just going to run over and get my baby who has just woken up as you're introducing me. I'm very sorry. Can you just give me 30 seconds?
Yes, of course. Maybe while Holly's getting her baby, I might maybe just ask you a question, Georgia, if that's all right. We had some questions that were submitted prior to the event. What would one piece of advice be that you would give someone embarking on fertility treatment?
Work together with whether you're doing this alone and working together with your fertility specialist, or working with your partner in whatever aspect that might be. To be not alone during this is really, I find, so important. People want to close off, and I think trying to bring it together as a community is really, really important. So don't close yourself off from people. Take the support you need in whichever manner that might be, whether it's therapy, partner, family, friends. Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me.
Great, thank you. Holly, you're back. Lovely and very appropriate.
As a solo parent by choice, I don't have a babysitting backup today, unfortunately.
Oh, that's not a problem at all. We love people who are such successful multitaskers. Over to you.
We'll see how I go. So yeah, my journey to having kids started with me being in a relationship with a woman, and we split up, and I felt like all my dreams of becoming a parent had just suddenly been dashed, because we'd been talking about doing the baby thing together. And you know, I was just turning 30, so I was at that pivotal point in my life, and I was, you know, a complete mess, to be honest. And my mum eventually said to me, why don't you just do it on your own, because you're always going to need a donor anyway. It's not that different in some ways. And I thought that I was the first person to have ever come up with this genius idea. It's like, wow, I'm so unique. And so I went to a doctor and asked for a referral. There's a bulk billing, it's a bulk billing fertility clinic in New South Wales that you can access through the hospital. And I remember feeling a little bit naughty asking for that referral. I remember feeling a little bit like I was doing something I shouldn't be doing because I was single. And no one ever said anything to me, but I've thought a lot about that over the years. And I think it's just this general idea in society that you have a baby with someone. And I already felt like I was on the outer because I was, you know, I'm queer. And then adding to that, being on the outer by being a solo parent, I kept waiting for someone to stop me. But the doctor was actually fine, and I got a referral, and eventually I got into the system, and the doctor there was fine as well, but the forms weren't. They hadn't caught up with same-sex couples, and they hadn't caught up with solo parents by choice yet. And I remember the night before my first appointment, they'd given me these forms to fill in, and it was all, I guess it was like patient and husband or something like that, or male and female forms or something. And I got a little bit drunk because I was a bit upset, and I crossed them all out with a red pen, and I was like, this does not apply, this does not apply. And, you know, I took them in the next morning. I was like, sort of, you know, shoved them in their face. It was really, like, I'm laughing about it, but it just set me back in that headspace of feeling like I was doing something I shouldn't be doing. Like I was being naughty by bucking the norm, and, you know, there wasn't even a form that fit me. And throughout my fertility journey, I just had this constant, I wrote about it in a blog because, as the person before me was talking about, it's very lonely, and I was trying to find community, and blogs were the thing back then. And I talked about how I always had to come out twice. So there was this constant, like, no, I don't have a husband because I'm single, but if I did have a partner, it would probably be a woman or a trans man. And so these things would not apply to me anyway. So there was this two-layered constant coming out with everyone, the nurses, the doctors, the clinicians, all of that, you know. And that gets really exhausting because meanwhile, I'm actually just focusing on the stress of trying to get pregnant, and that's enough in itself. The only time that anyone ever recognized my queerness, and this is funny, was when I had my first egg pickup, and my sister came with me. And she is also queer, but she looks more aesthetically queer. You know, she's sort of androgynous looking, and people pick her more often. And so someone thought that we were partners. And I remember feeling this really conflicting feeling of joy that I was being recognized for being a queer person, but also like, oh, that's my sister. So yeah, IVF is very lonely, and it's even lonelier on your own. I took friends to some appointments because I wanted a bit of a buffer zone, but there were times when people couldn't come along. And I remember sitting in the waiting room, and that waiting room is such a fraught space because everyone is so desperate in those rooms. And you know, I remember meeting people who was like, this is my last attempt. I've been doing this for 8 years. And if this doesn't work, I have to walk away. And, you know, so much emotional stuff tied up with it. But constantly getting these questions from people, is your husband joining you today? My hubby's around the corner, he'll be here soon, you know, that sort of thing. And it just, again, was an alienating space to be in. When I did finally see a doctor for the first time, a fertility doctor, I was told that I have polycystic ovary syndrome. So I already knew I had fertility issues, but I was told that I was also considered socially infertile, which is a really interesting term. And it means that because I'm not sleeping with someone who has sperm in their body, that I'm socially infertile. That felt a little bit like a slap in the face, I suppose. And just see where I was going. And then you have to, I had to see a counsellor to make sure that I knew what I was doing. And I understand the importance of seeing a fertility counsellor. Like, I think it can be a really valuable space, but my experience wasn't valuable. I felt like I was the one doing all of the educating in that space. She actually laughed when I said I was queer. I think she hadn't heard people use that term in a positive way. She was, you know, a little bit old school. And so I had to educate her about what that meant. She asked me what I was going to do about a male role model in my child's life, and all of, you know, this sort of discussion that, again, made me feel like I was doing something I shouldn't be doing. And that was a bit naughty. So that was a disappointing experience. There were some positives. You know, my fertility doctor was fantastic. She didn't bat an eyelid. She just said, are you sure you want to do this? Kids are awful. And the second time with my second baby, the experience was even better in a way because I was actually dating someone at the time. And amazingly, even though I was dating someone, I was having the baby on my own. And amazingly, no one assumed that she was the other parent, which actually was a really great experience for me because I felt like I was, you know, I was worried that I'd have to constantly explain that I was solo, even though there was another person there. So there have been some positives, and I think it's getting better with time. I just want to put my Rainbow Families Queensland hat on for a moment. So I'm cisgendered, which means that I was born, I have a body that people would identify as female and I identify as a woman. But I can't speak on behalf of trans and gender diverse people, but an ex-partner of mine was a trans man who carried both of his children himself, and I went with him to some of his fertility appointments, and he actually chose to not disclose that he was trans in those appointments, which was really interesting because he completely presents as a man. I think people were very confused and they always assumed that I was the one who was getting pregnant, of course. But the language, everything is women and mothers and babies, and even the word maternity, you know, it's related to women, and instead of the birthing centre, it's the maternity ward. And that was very hard for him. It gave him a lot of gender dysphoria. It made him, it pushed him back into the closet for a little while, I think, and delayed his transition. And, you know, that is, from a professional perspective, that is the biggest thing that I think needs to change in the fertility arena, is the gender language. We can't say women anymore because it's not just women who get pregnant. It's people, it's trans men, it's non-binary people. And so if we just take gender out of that discussion, it means that people aren't going to feel automatically alienated by that language. I'm not sure how long I've gone on for, and I know there are a few questions for me to answer.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Thank you, Holly.
Okay.
Actually, I think you've already answered one of them about how fertility clinics can be more inclusive. I think you already talked about quite a few things around, you know, better forms, better language. There's a whole bunch of things that you have mentioned there that are really useful. So thank you very much, and thank you for so generously sharing your story. I might just go to some of the questions. There's one that's probably appropriate for Beverley, actually. There's one about how many cycles on average does someone need to go through before they are successful with IVF?
Yep, so we don't look at cycles as much as transfers. So if we're looking at most people will have a blastocyst transfer. And so if 3 good blastocysts have been transferred, then I would expect that 60% of people 60 to 65% of people wanting to become pregnant will have become pregnant. So 3 good blastocysts.
Great. And there was a couple of other questions around if there's any benefits in asking for, I think you actually kind of alluded to some of this before, about asking for additional treatments if treatment isn't working, or in changing health providers, whether there's any benefits to those.
So in terms of asking for additional treatments, you've really got to look at why additional treatments are being asked for, because sometimes, you know, you can do something because you feel the need to do something, and what you do has no evidence. But also, the important thing is you actually don't know if it does harm. And you don't know if it does harm short-term or long-term. I mean, there are a lot of people on, you know, long-term immunosuppressives for infertility, and we actually don't know whether in the future that's going to raise their risk of cancer, etc. So I think it's really important to remain cognizant about not only short-term harm and long-term harm, about treatment that has been shown to be of no benefit. So I don't use add-ons unless there's evidence base for it.
Thanks. Holly and Georgia, there's a question here about what was the best experience you had with a health professional during your infertility journey and why? I hope there was one, Holly. Who would like to start?
Mine was when someone thought my sister was my partner.
Georgia?
I would say the most beneficial would be the fertility therapist. It was such a, as Holly said, that she didn't think that it would be very helpful towards her and her journey. But for me, I clocked onto it a bit too late and found that when I did go into the therapy side of things, it helped my mindset tenfold and really helped me process everything that was happening and get through that loneliness that everyone talks about with infertility.
Thank you. Beverley, there's another one here that I think you also briefly mentioned when you were talking before around the fact that it has historically been very expensive, and what do you see the future looking like for accessibility and affordability of IVF?
Well, I'm hoping that in Victoria anyway, that public IVF will come on board within this year. Now, it may not be fully functional within this year, but certainly if public IVF comes, is available, then it should make it much more affordable, because there won't be any cost. It'll be the same process, as in, it's not going to be a second-rate process, because people are not paying money for it or out of pocket for it. It'll be a gold standard process, but free. So hopefully that won't be too far away.
Great, thanks. It would be good if the other states follow.
Yes.
Holly, there's also a question here about what advice would you have for a single parent by choice who is struggling with feeling a bit isolated, as they don't know any other single parents?
Yeah, that's the thing I didn't get around to when I was talking, is that I thought I was the first person to have this idea, but of course I wasn't. And there's a huge community of people out there. And one of the best things that happened during my journey was finding the Solo Parents by Choice Facebook groups. There's an Australian Solo Mums by Choice Facebook group, and there's also an international Queer Solo Parents by Choice Facebook group. So there's a group for every different group. It's really amazing to be able to share that journey with other people who understand what it's like.
And if I could just add that the connection point for the Solo Mums by Choice is on the VARTA website. So we do make that available so that people know and can connect. So, if people need to find it. And I was wondering, sorry, you did ask some questions of Beverley, and I just wondered if I could add to that. One was about cycles, and Beverley, of course, being the clinician, has appropriately answered that. But one of the important factors, of course, is age is an evidence-based issue in relation to how successful you might be for how many cycles you might have. So in the VARTA resources, again, we've produced some material to give people an indication of how many cycles they might have in particular age groups, because that is a factor. So again, evidence-based, and that's available for people. And, again, to Beverley's point, Victoria's, I think, hopefully leading the way in terms of their launch of public IVF. I'm not sure, Beverley might know more, but I'm not sure who's going to qualify for that. So that's what we're waiting for. But if that's for everybody or for a, obviously a defined group of people who might be disadvantaged. And disadvantage is not just financially disadvantaged. Obviously, there's a whole lot of reasons why people can have difficulties accessing appropriate care. So I believe that in the tender, it is looking at quite a few different variables for who should qualify for that. So I think that's very exciting, and we're all waiting and very keen to see that. Another thing I just wanted to say just around that person-centered care, because Holly did talk about, very distressing that socially infertile language. And so again, for any ART clinics that are listening today, VARTA has a person-centered care booklet of 10 pages, very short and easy to read, but we think it's a lovely guidance for all ART clinics. Would encourage all ART clinics to read it.
Can I just add to that, that Rainbow Families Queensland have an excellent resource. I'm not sure if, Kate, that's been added to here. And it's a poster that I helped create, and it's about how to use language that's inclusive of diverse families. And yeah, again, it's really useful for all clinics and services.
Thanks, they're both really good points, Anna and Holly, thank you. Beverley, did you want to respond to Anna's question?
Yes, I will. We're still not certain about accessibility and who will, who will have primary access. At the moment, it looks like it's very broad, but there aren't a lot of cycles funded. There aren't unlimited cycles funded. So at some stage, we will need to look at how we, what the accessibility is going to be, but we don't know that yet.
So I've just got a couple more questions here. So Georgia and Holly, if you had a magic wand and could go back in time, might be hard for you to think of just one thing, but what is one thing that you would change about your own experience of infertility and/or fertility treatment?
Being open from the beginning, I think, and not closing myself off from the world, and making sure that, I was open and talking about it from the beginning. At first, I wanted it to be a secretive thing because I felt like it was a taboo subject, and it's really not. It's so not, and I couldn't scream that loud enough. We need to talk about it, and we need more resources like this one to be able to help people understand that, for sure.
I think for me, it would be not feeling like there was so much onus on me to fix the problem. I think I spent, because I knew I had PCOS from a fairly young age, and I spent years doing different things. And I'm not saying that this stuff doesn't help, but, like trying to lose weight and exercising, and then doing like these special Chinese diets and getting acupuncture and this, that, and the other. And some of those things definitely help, or at least help you emotionally. But I spent so much energy and time focusing on that. And then in the end, I had to do IVF anyway, because my donor had fertility problems. And I'd actually, and I think if I could have just let go of some of that and stopped feeling like it was something I could necessarily change, and acknowledge that there was medical help that could help it to happen, it would have helped me relax. And I know a lot of people in the Facebook groups I'm in really obsess over, am I eating the right things this day? And, oh gosh, I had a glass of wine, is that going to ruin it? And I think, the more you can let go of that and trust that there is amazing science that can help you, the more enjoyable the process will be, actually.
Thanks. Oh, that's such good. It's so valuable to hear from both of you. Thank you. I'm just going to ask Beverley one last question, and I'll ask any of the other panellists if they had any last thoughts they would like to contribute. So Beverley, someone said that one of my fertility specialists said that what we know about infertility and its causes is like a drop in the ocean. Is that true? And how quickly is the science advancing around infertility and its causes?
Yes, so look, I probably would agree to some extent with that comment. So, for example, couples trying to become pregnant, and I'm talking about heterosexual couples here, may have unexplained infertility. And what that means is that the tests have all been done, but no cause has actually been found. That doesn't mean that pregnancy is not possible. It just means we haven't found a cause. So in that group of people, there may be hormonal factors that we don't know about. There may, because we don't measure hormones on a second-by-second basis. There may be tubal factors that are minor that we don't know about. There may be male factors that don't become apparent. So I think, as is probably rightly said, there's a lot that we don't know. The research now is focusing on not finding out the causes, but as much as trying to find out how we can improve success. So success with treatment, particularly with IVF treatment in certain groups of people. So, for example, of couples with advanced maternal age, both couples, again, heterosexual relationship, men and women. Also, looking at implantation failure and why does a great embryo not implant, but an embryo that's not that great implant. So that's where the research is really now focused on, is how can we make this better rather than going right back to the cause.
And yeah, great. Well, I think there's lots happening there still, isn't there? I had actually I missed one last question for you. There's someone who had premature ovarian insufficiency themselves. Should their daughter have any special investigations?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I think I would, and I think I would certainly be doing some ovarian reserve testing. Now, this is tricky as to when you start doing this, because I think it's very important that the daughter understands, or the individual understands, why it's happening and why the tests are being done and what the implications may be for the results. So I think, and so the age at which you choose to do that will vary on the maturity of the daughter. But I do think that it probably is something that should be done, but when will be the issue.
Thanks. So I'm just going to pop quickly around the panel. Kate, did you have anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think I just, the only thing I wanted to maybe briefly say was in response to some of that question about what clinics can do. One of the people that we spoke with on the resource who is non-binary said sometimes they think that we can overcomplicate these things, and that perhaps starting just from a position of curiosity and saying, what is it that you need? How can I support you? Is the easiest way forward. So yeah, but that was all. Thank you everybody for your fantastic contributions.
Thanks. Helena, did you have any last things you wanted to add in?
No, just to say thank you to the tremendous effort from everybody. Really, I really just watched from afar with awe at the great work that everybody did here. So thank you, Jackie. And just thank you to Amanda too in the background for organising the event.
Absolutely. Yeah. Georgia?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me be a part of this, and I think it's really, really important. So I'm really glad that I was a part of such an important research project.
Oh, thanks, Georgia. Anna?
Thank you. As I've already said, it's a fabulous resource for people. And what I think it also helps you not only feel that you're not alone and you can get support from that, but also it helps you make informed decisions as well, I think, which I think is fabulous, because we want everybody to make informed decisions. To Beverley's point earlier, there's a lot of adjuvant therapies that really don't have any evidence to support it. So again, when you're struggling, when finances might be an issue, am I better off having another cycle rather than having one cycle with all the add-ons, all the bells and whistles, when they might really not help me at all. So they're the things we really want people to question, and to hear from other people with lived experience, and to be able to feel brave enough to go into their clinician and their holistic support team at ART clinics and say, well, show me, I want to ask valid questions, and I feel better positioned to ask questions. Or to Holly's point, this is how I would like, your language to be when you speak to me. And it's okay if you're not used to it. This is what makes me feel comfortable, and so having that dialogue between people. And to George's point, just finding resources about understanding general terminology. She's come from a nursing background, but then, I didn't, I do this part of nursing. I didn't really quite know much about infertility. So to tell me the language and what all the medical terms and scientific terms you're using. So, that's why talking to other people who've been in your position, getting back to why this resource is so great.
Great. Thanks so much, Anna. I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry, because I need to quickly, rapidly run through a list of thank yous. Holly, did you have any quick last things?
Just that you're not alone. Find your community, join Rainbow Families organisations in your area, and yeah, good luck.
Thanks. So I have a real thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for all the panellists and speeches, to Monash Centre for Health Research and Implementation and VARTA for being the host launching this today. To all of our project participants, we are immensely grateful for your time and for sharing your generosity and sharing your experience. Our project partners, which we've already mentioned, MCHRI, RMIT, project partners, Health Talk, MCHRI, Monash University, and our reference group members, particularly Professor Rob Norman, VARTA, and Dr. Sarah Lenson, our research team from RMIT, who Kate's already mentioned, Crosswalk Media, and the team that coordinated the launch. Thank you everyone so much for your time, and thank you to everyone who's attended today for listening, and please share the resource. Thank you.